My husband left me 2 weeks after our wedding because his ex got terminal cancer and he wanted to fulfill her dying wish to marry him. Now, 3 years later, she's completely fine and living her best life while he is begging to come back after finding out she faked everything. I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but here I am. I, 28F, got divorced from my husband, 31M, just 2 weeks after our wedding 3 years ago, and the reason still sounds unbelievable to me. My ex-husband Jake and I had been together for 4 years before we got married. We had what I thought was a perfect relationship, we rarely fought, supported each other's dreams, and had similar goals for our future. The wedding was beautiful, everything I had ever dreamed of since I was a little girl. We had a gorgeous outdoor ceremony in my parents' garden, surrounded by blooming roses and twinkling lights. I can still remember the way Jake looked at me as I walked down the aisle, tears in his eyes, promising me forever. All our friends and family were there, celebrating our love, telling us how perfect we were together. Even Jake's mother, who had been hesitant about our relationship at first, pulled me aside during the reception to tell me how happy she was to finally have me as a daughter. Jake seemed happy too, at least that's what I thought. He danced with me all night, kissed me in front of everyone, and whispered promises of our future together in my ear. But 2 weeks after we returned from our honeymoon, he sat me down with tears in his eyes and told me he needed to tell me something important. It was a Sunday morning, I remember because I was still in my pajamas, making us breakfast. I had just learned how to make his favorite eggs Benedict, and I was so excited to surprise him. The hollandaise sauce was still warming on the stove when he came into the kitchen with this look on his face that made my stomach drop. He asked me to sit down, his voice shaking. I thought maybe something had happened to his parents, or he'd lost his job. Never in a million years could I have predicted what he was about to tell me. His ex-girlfriend Sarah, who he had dated for 2 years before meeting me, had reached out to him. As he spoke, I noticed he was fidgeting with his wedding ring, a nervous habit he developed in the 2 short weeks he'd worn it. Sarah had stage 4 cancer and, according to her doctors, she only had months to live. Jake showed me the text on his phone, his hands trembling as he scrolled through their conversation. There were dozens of messages, spanning several days. I felt sick realizing he'd been talking to her for days without telling me. The timestamps showed they'd even been texting during our romantic dinner just 2 nights ago, the one where he told me how happy he was to be married to me. My heart sank when I heard this. Even though I had never met Sarah, I felt terrible for her, she was only 30 years old. But then Jake continued talking, and what he said next made my world crash around me. Sarah's dying wish was to marry Jake? She had apparently never stopped loving him and wanted to spend her final months as his wife. I sat there in shock as Jake explained through tears that he couldn't deny a dying woman her last wish. He said he still loved me, but Sarah needed him more right now, and he had to do this for her. He actually expected me to understand and wait for him while he married another woman. Can you believe that? I was devastated, angry, and humiliated all at once. The wedding gifts were still unopened in our living room. Our honeymoon photos hadn't even been uploaded to social media yet. The dress I had worn on our first date still hung in our closet. I had kept it all these years because Jake always said it was the moment he fell in love with me. How could he do this to me? How could he throw away our marriage for someone he hadn't seen in years? The same man who had just vowed to love me forever 2 weeks ago was now telling me he needed to marry someone else. It felt like I was trapped in some kind of cruel joke, except nobody was laughing. I asked him if he still had feelings for her, and he couldn't even give me a straight answer. He just kept saying that this was something he had to do, that he would never forgive himself if he didn't. I told him that if he walked out that door, our marriage was over, that I wouldn't wait around while he played house with his ex. But he still chose to leave. He actually filed for divorce the next day. I was completely broken. I had to move back in with my parents because I couldn't stand being in our house alone. Everything reminded me of him and the future we had planned together. My friends and family were furious. They thought Jake had lost his mind. Some even suggested that Sarah might be lying about her illness, but I couldn't let myself think like that. It would have been too cruel to fake something like that. Right? The divorce was quick, but every moment was excruciating. Jake gave me everything I wanted, probably out of guilt, but that didn't make it any easier. Walking into our lawyer's office and seeing him there, already wearing a different wedding ring, Sarah's ring, made me physically ill. I had to excuse myself to throw up in the bathroom. My lawyer, a kind woman in her 50s who had handled many divorces, told me she'd never seen anything quite like this. The division of assets was straightforward since we'd only been married for 2 weeks. Jake signed over his share of our house to me, left me all our wedding gifts, and even offered me a significant amount of money as a settlement, though we hadn't been married long enough for me to be entitled to anything. His lawyer kept trying to talk him out of it, but Jake insisted. He said it was the least he could do after what he'd put me through. The worst part was returning our wedding gifts. Every time I packed up another box, wrote another apologetic note explaining the situation to our guests, I felt humiliated all over again. Some of our friends and family had spent hundreds of dollars on expensive china and kitchen appliances we'd never used together. My mom offered to handle it for me, but I felt like I needed to do it myself, like it was part of accepting this new reality. The day we signed the final papers, Jake tried to talk to me privately. He waited for me in the parking lot of the lawyer's office, looking pale and thin. He said he still loved me, that he would always love me, but he had to do this for Sarah. I remember laughing, a hollow, bitter sound that surprised even me. I told him he didn't know the meaning of love, that love doesn't make you destroy someone's life 2 weeks after promising them forever. I spent the next year trying to rebuild my life, though some days it felt impossible. The first few months were the hardest. I would wake up reaching for him, only to remember he was probably waking up next to her. I lost weight, couldn't sleep, and had to take a leave of absence from work because I couldn't focus on anything. My parents were worried sick about me. My mom would come into my room every morning to make sure I got out of bed and ate something. My dad, who had always been stoic, cried when he found me one night sitting in the dark, wearing my wedding dress and staring at our photos. Finally, after hitting rock bottom, I started therapy. My therapist helped me understand that I wasn't broken, that I didn't deserve what happened to me. She helped me see that Jake's actions reflected his character, not my worth. Slowly, I started focusing on my career again. I threw myself into work, earned a promotion, and started setting new goals for myself. I redecorated my apartment, removing every trace of Jake. I started going to the gym, not to look good for anyone else, but because it made me feel strong. I joined a support group for divorced women and made new friends who understood what I was going through. Day by day, I started to feel like myself again, or rather, a stronger version of myself. I even started dating again, though it took me a long time to trust someone new. But yesterday, everything changed. I received a call from Jake. He was crying and could barely get the words out. Apparently, Sarah never had cancer. She had faked everything, the doctor's reports, the treatments, everything. She had seen photos from our engagement on social media and decided she wanted him back, so she came up with this elaborate lie. She had been living perfectly healthy these past 3 years, even started a successful business, and was now dating someone new. Jake found out because he ran into her sister at a coffee shop who had no idea about any cancer diagnosis. When he confronted Sarah, she just laughed and said she had moved on and he should too. Jake told me he feels like a complete fool, that he realizes now what a horrible mistake he made and wants another chance with me. He says he never stopped loving me and that leaving me was the biggest regret of his life. He's been calling and texting nonstop, begging for forgiveness. I haven't responded to any of his messages. I feel a mix of emotions right now. Part of me feels vindicated that my life wasn't destroyed for nothing, that Sarah was exactly who my friends thought she was. But mostly, I feel angry that Jake was so easily manipulated, angry that he threw away our marriage without even questioning her story, angry that he's only sorry because he found out the truth. Update 1. Wow, I wasn't expecting this post to blow up like it did. Thank you all for your support and advice. I've read every comment, and they've really helped me process my feelings about this situation. I wanted to give you all an update on what's happened since my post. Jake hasn't stopped trying to contact me. He's even shown up at my workplace with flowers and tried to talk to me through my friends. I had to tell my boss about the situation, and thankfully, they've been very understanding and supportive. They've instructed security not to let him in the building. Yesterday, I finally agreed to meet him in a public place just to get him to stop harassing me and my friends. I thought maybe hearing me say it to his face would make him understand that there's no chance of us getting back together. The meeting was intense. Jake broke down crying as soon as he saw me. He kept saying how sorry he was, how he'd spend the rest of his life making it up to me if I just gave him another chance. But the more he talked, the more I realized how little he's changed. He actually had the nerve to say that, in a way, this whole situation proved how loyal he was, that he was willing to sacrifice his own happiness to help someone in need. Can you believe that? He's trying to spin abandoning his wife of 2 weeks as some noble act. I told him exactly what I thought about his loyalty, that a loyal person would have at least questioned Sarah's story, would have asked to see medical records or speak to her doctors, that a loyal husband wouldn't have jumped at the first chance to leave his new wife. He tried to argue that he was young and stupid, that he got caught up in the emotion of it all, but I reminded him that he was 28 when this happened, not 18. He was old enough to know better. The conversation ended with me telling him that I never wanted to hear from him again, that the Jake I loved died 3 years ago when he walked out that door, and the person sitting across from me now was just a stranger I had no interest in knowing. Update 2. Things have gotten even more interesting. Sarah reached out to me through Instagram. She actually had the audacity to apologize, said she was in a bad place 3 years ago and wasn't thinking clearly. She claimed she had gotten therapy since then and wanted to make amends. I asked her how she could live with herself knowing she destroyed a marriage. I expected her to be defensive or make excuses, but her response shocked me. She was surprisingly candid, almost clinical in her analysis of the situation. She sat there, sipping her fancy latte in some trendy cafe, looking successful and put together, while casually discussing how she had destroyed my life like it was just an interesting story to tell. She said that if Jake really loved me, he wouldn't have left, that she had expected him to turn her down and was surprised when he actually agreed to marry her. She even suggested that maybe this was all for the best, that I found out what kind of man Jake really was before we had kids or built a life together. As much as I hate to admit it, she might have a point. If Jake could leave me so easily once, what's to say he wouldn't do it again? I deserve someone who chooses me first, not someone who sees me as a backup plan. Update 3. Jake's family contacted me yesterday. They're furious with him and Sarah. His mother especially feels terrible about everything. She revealed that she had had doubts about Sarah's story from the beginning, but Jake wouldn't listen to anyone. He was so convinced he was doing the right thing. They told me that Jake has fallen into a deep depression. He's not eating or sleeping properly, and they're worried about him. His mother said he's lost 20 pounds in the last month alone. He's taken an indefinite leave from work and spends most days just lying in his old childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling. She found our wedding album under his pillow last week and all our old photos scattered across his floor. Apparently, he sits there for hours, just looking at them and crying. His father, who had always been Jake's biggest supporter during our divorce, can't even look at him anymore. He's disgusted by how his son handled everything. When Jake tried to defend himself, saying he was just trying to do the right thing, his father apparently snapped and told him that real men don't abandon their wives 2 weeks after their wedding, no matter the circumstance. That conversation ended with Jake having a complete breakdown, punching a hole in his bedroom wall, and his parents having to call his doctor for emergency anxiety medication. Part of me feels bad for him, but then I remember how he left me to deal with my own emotional breakdown alone 3 years ago when he destroyed my world. His sister asked me if I would consider talking to him again, saying he's not the same person he was 3 years ago, but I don't want to be responsible for his healing. That's not my job anymore. He needs to work through this with a therapist, not his ex-wife. Update 4. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about everything that's happened, and I've come to realize something important. While this whole situation has been incredibly painful, it's also been a blessing in disguise. 3 years ago, I thought Jake was the love of my life, that I would never be happy without him. But these past 3 years have shown me just how strong I am. I've built a successful career, bought my own home, and created a life I'm proud of. I've also met someone new, David. He's everything Jake wasn't. He's thoughtful, considerate, and most importantly, he puts me first. We met at a local coffee shop where I'd started doing my work to avoid being alone in my house. For weeks, we'd see each other there, exchanging glances and shy smiles. One day, he finally worked up the courage to sit at my table, asking if I minded sharing the outlet for his laptop. We ended up talking for hours, long after both our laptops had died. At first, I was hesitant to start anything. I told him upfront about my past, expecting him to run for the hills. Instead, he listened with such genuine empathy and understanding. He didn't try to fix things or tell me everything happens for a reason like so many others had. He just held my hand and thanked me for trusting him enough to share my story. We've been dating for 6 months now, and he's shown me what real love looks like. He remembers little things about me, how I like my coffee, what music calms me down after a hard day, which side of the bed I prefer. He makes plans for our future but never pressures me. When I have moments of doubt or fear, he's patient and reassuring. We've even started looking at houses together, talking about building a life that's truly ours. When I told him about Jake and Sarah, he just held me and said that Jake was the biggest fool he'd ever heard of. His loss is my gain, he told me, but I wish you hadn't had to go through that pain to find me. David has taught me that love shouldn't hurt, that real partnership means facing challenges together, not creating them for each other. Yesterday, David and I ran into Jake at La Luna, the Italian restaurant where Jake and I had our first date. I used to avoid this place like the plague, but David had heard they had the best tiramisu in town and wanted to take me there. I hesitated at first but realized I couldn't let Jake's ghost haunt every place that used to mean something to us. I needed to reclaim these spaces for myself. We were halfway through our meal, David making me laugh with his terrible Italian accent as he tried to pronounce the menu items, when I saw Jake walk in. He was alone, looking thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes. His face when he saw us together said it all. He looked devastated. His eyes moved from my face to David's hand holding mine on the table, to the way I was clearly glowing with happiness. He stood frozen at the entrance, looking like he'd been punched in the gut. But for the first time, I felt nothing. No pain, no anger, just indifference. And that's when I knew I was finally truly over him. So to Jake, if you're reading this, thank you. Thank you for showing me who you really are before we had children. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to find someone who actually deserves my love. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to the best things in life. Looking back now, I realize that what felt like the end of my world was actually the beginning of a better one. A world where I'm stronger, wiser, and truly loved. A world where I don't have to question my worth or wonder if I'm enough. A world where I can look in the mirror and be proud of the woman staring back at me. To anyone going through something similar, know that it gets better. The pain doesn't last forever. You're stronger than you think, and there's a whole life waiting for you on the other side of heartbreak. Don't let someone else's actions define your worth or determine your future. Your happiness is out there, sometimes it just takes a detour to find it. I'm happier now than I ever was with Jake, and that's the best revenge of all. Because the truth is, the best revenge isn't about getting even or making the other person suffer, it's about living your best life despite what they did to you. It's about turning their betrayal into your breakthrough. And that's exactly what I've done.